David, talking as you were at the beginning about the high percentage of self-represented litigants trying to navigate the system and the potential AI has to start putting power into people's hands to self-navigate or navigate with tools that the court creates for them. There's been a lot of conversation about both the power that the tools create, but also are there risks involved in sort of democratizing access to the tools? We all know on this Zoom that lawyers have always sort of had the control of designing the systems, even though the outcomes are that most people are navigating the systems without lawyers at their side, as you said. So, how are you thinking through creating frameworks for harnessing the power of AI while minimizing the risks to people who are using AI to self navigate the systems?
Well, let's start with one thing which I keep saying, and I know Bridget and I had lots of conversations about this about 5 years ago, which is that our system that exists today is not without risk, and it causes many harms. When we were going through the pandemic, I remember Bridget and I having conversations with people about, well, what if the this happens, because we're doing something remote, and we were like, hang on, that happens today in the physical world. Like we're not creating a utopia. So we have to understand that there are risks and harms that come with the system that we've had. So a system without AI, a system without that has failures and risk as well that are significant. So I just want to sort of set that aside for a second. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing everything we can to reduce those risks and harms. And we know that AI can bring those into to bear if we're not careful. So I'll just give you an example of something we're looking at. I mentioned court help on our website. We did a couple things. One is we trained that tool to only use content from our website or from the Judicial Council of California. Obviously, we don't want it going out and searching the World Wide Web and providing answers. It would provide answers that are we don't really control. And then we're sort of fine tuning that tool to tell it sort of how creative to be. It's obviously trying to think about the ways that we use AI. And I don't want people to be scared of AI because I think courts need to be embracing it more. But I think at the same time, you've got to be careful. You've got to think about the way that you're using those tools, what content you're allowing it to rely on, and those type of things. And then I think, I mean, one of the criticisms of these automated tools is, the bias and things it brings in. I think you've got to think about what's the content and the information it's using to provide information to litigants. So, and I think at the end of the day, go on court help and look for yourself. We put a disclaimer on there. This might not be right, but guess what? The clerk in the self help center probably doesn't get it right 100% of the time either. So I think we don't give those disclaimers. But bottom line is we've got to think about ways and keep getting feedback. So again, I keep bringing this up, but on court help we have a thumbs up, thumbs down. If the answer it gives you is a bad answer, and hopefully people will give us a thumbs down, and then we take that information as a feedback loop and we try to make improvements to the system. That's sort of, I think, the path forward on this. I don't think we should go into this not with eyes wide open that there are risks. I do hope we remember that there's a risk to doing nothing as well, which are the ones that have existed for decades, if not centuries.
It also sounds like to me, David, if I could ask a follow-up question. I've had conversations with friends and colleagues who work as public interest lawyers and legal aid organizations, and sometimes the question is posed as a binary choice, that it's either somebody who is represented by a legal aid attorney with when the stakes are the highest and they're in a trial situation or a hearing in front of a judge, and it's either they're represented by a lawyer or they're represented by a robot. And, why would you want a world in which that's the outcome? And it sounds to I would not want that world to to be the outcome. But to me, there are millions, like literally millions of different gradations between that situation and what you're describing, which is making websites and making information more usable, more accessible. So maybe just curious about your thoughts about thinking through different ways to select uses that are low risk and identifying those and rolling out opportunities to test and get feedback from self-represented litigants there versus the more high stakes situations where we would want to focus lawyer time and attention and the promise of AI to help us move lawyers more in that direction. Is that how you think about AI?
Yeah, that's a great description the way you've laid it out, which is, I sort of see AI as a tool, and it's not a replacement. It's a tool, and think about it from the perspective of a self-represented litigant, um, and maybe even think about it from a triage perspective. Maybe level one is an AI tool that helps provide them information to move them along the path, and maybe that's enough for X percent. Maybe it's even a large percent. And then there are those that are going to need additional help, and we want to be able to almost we want to use the AI to point them to, okay, now you need to go to the self help center, or you need to call the self help center, because you this is not going to help you. But the problem is, of course, we don't have unlimited funds and unlimited staff, and so the we want to be using our tools just like with legal aid. We want to be using the resources we have to help the most people, and I think of AI as a tool that's sort of a force multiplier. It gives us more opportunity to help more people. But at the end of the day, we're gonna be there. We're gonna have the self help staff there. Lawyers are gonna be there to really try to guide people in a way that's more helpful. It's really interesting. I started when I was at the court. We started our project with the Stanford Law School, and my original question for them was, why are all these people standing outside the self help center every morning? Because um, they can do everything that they're doing here online. And coming to downtown LA to one of our self help centers is no easy task. Parking, traffic, all the things there that go with that. And, so my original question slash hypothesis to them was, can't we get these people to appear remotely using the technology we have for them? And, they did focus groups, they did all this research, and they came back to me a couple months later and said, the reason why they're coming in person, because this is the most important thing that's happening in their lives. And they're terrified they'll get it wrong. And they just want someone to say, yeah, that's the right form. Yes, that's what you put there in that blank. So sometimes that human touch is so important, especially in situations where people have so much at risk. And I think we can't forget that. Technology is a tool that can help people, move people along the path, give them information that at least reduces their anxiety and frustration. But we've got to have the people there to assist when really those needs rise above what we can provide to them through technology.
So interesting. I mean, in a way, it's only by again, like starting to put the technology into people's hands or into your users' lives that you find what those better use cases are, and then use cases that might surprise you where they want to like park and drive and talk to a person, and you only know that by again like taking steps in a particular direction. So I think a very clear picture of your change management leadership, and this is why like you're as successful as you are is emerging. And you flagged this HBR article about the CEO at Moody's, sort of diving into generative AI, which is sort of a surprising institution for to do that. And I think I now know why you flagged it, but I'd rather hear it from you. Like, what resonated with you about that story, and what can we learn from it?
Yeah, so obviously Moody's a over century old institution, sort of financial industry, so very risk averse to try, doing things that are out there. Reputation super important. Sounds kind of familiar. Sounds like the types of institutions we work in. And so, when I was reading this article, I just found it fascinating because one of the challenges I think we face when we're talking about court staff and judicial officers is fear of the unknown fear of AI, and not understanding how this might be a tool that would help us in our daily work, but also help those that we serve. And one of the things that I found, and also, if in that article, the Moody's CEO basically said, we don't have a choice but to really embrace this, because if we don't, we're going to be left behind. We're not going to be able to serve our clients. Bottom line is will not exist. And I think again, that's a challenge for us. This is not something like, some courts still don't have electronic filing because they chose not to have electronic filing. I don't think we're in that situation with AI. We don't really have a choice. It's coming to us, and our staff and our judges are using it whether we know it or not. And so I think it's sort of, how do we embrace this in a way that's effective? So, one of the things that I thought that was really fascinating that the Moody CEO did with all that information was to say, one, we need to make sure everyone in our organization understands AI, how it can be used, have a basic level of understanding amongst everyone in the organization. And then we want to give them tools to be able to innovate with AI. And we want innovation to be driven from the ground up. And I just found that to be really fascinating. I think if I sit in my office as a CEO and say, you all need to use AI to do X, Y, and Z, the resistance is going to be tremendous because people don't understand it. They're scared of it. They don't understand how it might be helpful to them. So the goal here is to sort of flip, for me at least, what Moody's did is what we're looking to do is sort of flip this upside down and to say, let's give everybody the tools they need to have a better understanding of it. Let's give them actual tools that they can use safely and effectively in their functions every day. And then let's let them just sort of basically almost be demanding from us, give me AI to solve this problem and that problem and this problem. That changes the way this looks. I mean, I work in an organization where most of our employees are represented by labor. We don't want labor pushing it, fighting against us saying, oh, this is going to eliminate jobs or whatever. That's not the message. The message, this is a tool that can really help employees with the work that they're already doing. And we want them to be demanding it from us versus us trying to push it down on them and them resisting it. And I found that Moody's article, the HBR article, to be really instructive to me as something that I could take and do in my own organization. And we're on the cusp of doing that.
Couldn't agree more. Like that, so many different things you said. The market will show no loyalty to our traditional ways of working. It won't. It's not going to care. And for a general purpose technology, Jen and I do a lot of presentations on this, and a general purpose technology is just going to be throughout our lives. It's not like some tech upgrade that you can decide not to put in place, right? You can say like we the LA court system are not going to put, we're not going to put our data in the cloud. We've decided that's too dangerous. We're not going to do that. So you're going to have to keep filing, and we're going to have everything on prem. Um, this is this is going to be throughout our lives, and that's the thing with general purpose technologies, right? You don't fully understand all the ways it's going to impact you, but by giving all of your teams access and encouragement, they'll be the ones to figure out where it can have an impact on the workflows that that are the most tedious, and also just the ones that can easily be automated. And probably some of them in particular jobs will know that better than you will, right? You don't do that job in that clerk, that assistant clerk's like docket. Yep. And then they'll be the ones to help you figure out like where are the ways it's going to make a difference in our operations, and where are the ways it's going to make a difference in our core services. It's you're like running the playbook that Ethan Mollick calls leadership lab crowd. It's coming from the top so that it can come from the bottom, and everybody is in. The entire crowd has to be involved. And that's how you probably will identify your lab, those folks who will become super users and help you figure out the roadmap. I feel like you have to update that article you wrote with Chief Justice Hecht. There's like a new chapter.
It's also making me think, Bridget, of our last podcast with the MIT report on the failed pilots. Our team works with firms on pilots. Bridget's team runs pilots for specific purposes. But David, what you're describing and what the Moody's article describes aligns, I think, with what that report finds, which we talked about as not being that surprising. And to just reflect Bridget's comments, everybody's sort of playing around with this in their own individual space and figuring out what it means for them. And the sort of takeaway in the media of that report was like, this is all hype and it's not really something worth investing in. where what at least I took from it is the contrary, is that everybody's playing with it in their own space, and it's not yet ready in most cases for highly structured, sort of measured ROI, because everybody just has to learn to build a muscle around it. And then, as Bridget's saying, it starts surfacing use cases and really strong ways to put structure around it where you can organize real, impactful, as you said at the beginning, David, ways to be effective as an organization that serves your community.